Chapter 18 in the book of John documents Jesus' arrest and he and his disciples, when they left the upper room, have been on the Mount of Olives. And in the previous chapter, Jesus offers up that beautiful prayer for his disciples, which includes us. Chapter 18, verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where was a garden, into the which he entered, and his disciples. Now, of course, John doesn't mention the name, but this is the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane means oil press. They would have come down off the mountain, crossed the valley, and that garden was located between the east gate and the Mount of Olives. Now, Jesus went there to keep an appointment with Judas, whom he full well knew was en route there. The disciples followed along, looking to spend a cool evening with their Lord. 2. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted there with his disciples. He knew exactly where Jesus would go. 3. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Now, this band would have been supplied by the Sanhedrin. They were not Roman soldiers. They are armed for night combat with lanterns and torches and weapons. Now, they didn't really need any weaponry to capture Jesus. Why? Perhaps they thought that the disciples might create some kind of disturbance to be put down. Perhaps they wanted to think Judas needed some protection, or perhaps they thought that some of the crowd that had followed him when he entered Jerusalem some days earlier might get up in arms. However, it is dark, and if there are persons around, very few. And of course, darkness is the time of Satan. 3. Judas then, having received a band, we did number 3, 4. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things, could read minds, that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seek ye? And they answered, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. Now, the King James Version has the I am he. The word he is in italics, which means that it was added. He merely said, I am. That's the sacred name, Ea, Asher, Ea. 6. As soon as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground. Now that is from Psalm 9:3. As soon as he used that sacred name, they fell. Now, today we use the persons who have interaction with the Holy Spirit can fall in the Spirit or be slain in the Spirit. And this is exactly what happened to these soldiers here. They were overcome with the power of God, and it knocked them backwards. Psalm 9:3. When mine enemies are turned back, they shall fall and perish at thy presence. They didn't perish, but they fell to the ground. And we wonder that power, that mighty dunamis power of God that knocked them to the ground, what did they think? How did they feel? What did they think afterwards when they saw how this day would play out? It is dark of night. It is still Wednesday. It will be Wednesday until sundown the next day for us, the next day. 7. Then asked he them again, Whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you, I am he. Again, he is italicized, added by the translators into English. Therefore you seek me, let these go their way. In other words, he is asking to just take me, but let these disciples go. 9. That the saying might be fulfilled which he spake, Of them which thou gavest me, I lost none. Now this is not a quote from the Old Testament. It is a quote from Jesus himself. Remember back in previous chapters, even when he made this prayer in 17, he tells God, I have not lost those whom you have given me. 10. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus, and that means king. Now, Simon Peter was armed with a sword, and the very fact that he was able to draw that sword and cut off a right ear is a testimony to his ability with the sword. Otherwise, he would have smashed the man's head. Now, Luke has, in Luke 22, Jesus heals that ear. Once again, you wonder about these persons who came to arrest him falling to the ground under the power of God, and then seeing an ear cut off and then healed. We wonder why they carried through with this plan. 11. Then said Jesus unto Peter, Put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? In other words, the cup he knows he will drink. He is not trying to evade the crucifixion. He does not want any interference, and he is telling Simon Peter not to resist. 13. And led him away to Annas, Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. Now he was the high priest, but if you have been studying the Bible study in Leviticus, you know that high priests were descendants of Aaron, and then later the Levites, because of their stand with Moses. This person had no more business in the high priest office than any common person out of the congregation. He was appointed by the Roman government. Now, he is going before Caiaphas. Caiaphas means depression, interestingly enough. And the trial's going to be twofold. There's going to be an ecclesiastical, and there's going to be a civil. Now, Annas was the first person he was taken before. He was the high priest from the year 7 AD to 14 AD, and he was succeeded by 5 sons and then this son-in-law Caiaphas. He was likely a powerful person. We might think of him as the high priest Demetrius. In other words, he had standing as having served as a high priest. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And my goodness, that was the Holy Spirit speaking right through that old depressed one. And he did die for his people. 15, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. Now, tradition tells us that that is John himself. How would John be known by the Sanhedrin? Scholars who want to put that forth say, oh, well, Judas told them who John was. But why? Consternation was not John's bailiwick. If he wanted to identify someone who might cause trouble, he surely would have identified Peter, because he just did pull out a sword and cut off an ear. Likely it was one of two persons who would have been known by these high priests, and they are recent disciples. One of them, Joseph of Arimathea, he was a great uncle to Jesus, and historical accounts tell us that he was a trader in 10, and that he made many trips across to southern England, and there are records that he came in a boat with a young boy with him, and it is thought to have been Jesus. The other would be Nicodemus, and we have read in a recent chapter that Nicodemus was a member of the Sanhedrin, a Pharisee, who invited Jesus into his home and became a believer. Either one of these two men, Joseph of Arimathea or Nicodemus, were members of the Sanhedrin, and they certainly would have known them immediately. 16. But Peter stood at the door without. Now, why didn't Peter go in? The other disciple that went in was actually a member of the Sanhedrin. Peter was not, and he had no business in there, and quite likely would not have been allowed. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Okay, Peter got to go in on the word of either Nicodemus or Joseph of Arimathea, we know not which. Then saith the damsel, that kept the door unto Peter, art thou not also one of this man's disciples? He said, I am not. Told a lie. First denial. 18. And the servants and officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. Cold desert night in April. 19. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. 20. Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret I have said nothing. Now, the Sanhedrin is meeting in the middle of the night, and that is not considered legal. 21. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I have said. This Sanhedrin is trying hard to make a political case that can be taken before Pilate. They can accuse him of blasphemy, but they know full well that Pilate will not care a fig about a charge of blasphemy and would do nothing. 22. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? In other words, he is chastising, strikes the God incarnate for being smart with the high priest. 24. Now Annas had sent him bound until Caiaphas, the high priest. He slaps a man whose hands are tied. 25. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. And they said therefore unto them, Art thou not also one of his disciples? He denied it and said, I am not. 26. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Here is this chap whose ear was cut off, and according to Luke, healed, and he is in here part of this arrest, an attempt to bring Jesus before Caesar for a real kind of a sentence. 27. Peter then denied again, and immediately the cock crew. And Jesus had foretold that. He turned to him and said, Peter, before the cock crows 3 times, you will have denied me. Now, if the cock crowed, then we know that it is in the early morning hours, right before sunrise. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas into the hall of judgment, and this would have been a hall of judgment used by the Roman government, not by the Jewish religious leaders. And it was early morning, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but they might eat the Passover. Now the Passover is going to be the following day. This very day that we are in, Wednesday, early morning hours, when sun sets, the Passover begins. And one who has entered a building of Gentiles would be considered defiled and could not obtain cleansing in sufficient time to partake of the Passover, and that is why they did not go in. 29. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? Okay, only the Roman government could carry out a death sentence. The Sanhedrin could bring a charge, but they could do nothing. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death. They have shown their cards. They, of course, do want him put to death, but they are powerless to do so. And they, of course, in verse 30, said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. So they are trying to make a case that he is a malefactor. In other words, if they can somehow convince Pilate that he is an insurrectionist working against Caesar, they will have what they want. 32. That the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. 33. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Notice that Pilate, is outside, and then he takes Jesus inside. There are 3 interludes here privately between Jesus and Pilate, and 2 between Pilate and Jesus on the outside. Some are inside and some are out. Now, there's only one king, and that is Caesar. And if he's going to claim kingship, he will be in trouble with the Roman government. Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? He didn't say. He said, Well, are you saying it, or did someone else say it? 35. Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? That would have been a low thing for a Roman citizen to have admitted to. Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priest have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? 36. Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. So he has given an answer here that Pilate certainly is not going to understand at all. 37. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. 38. And Pilate said unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews, back on the outside. Had Jesus on the inside, he's outside with the crowd. And saith unto them, I find in him no fault at all. 39. But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will you therefore that I release unto you the king of the Jews. And that's going to set them off, because that his calling himself the King of the Jews they consider an insult. Then cried they all again, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber, and his name, ironically, Bar meaning son of, Abbas meaning father, son of the father. So they substituted the real son of the father for freedom with a robber who bore the name the son of the father. King of the Jews would have been considered from Pilate to be mockery to not only Jesus, but also to these Jews who are there outside the court of judgment. St. John chapter 18, the arrest and trial of Jesus, part of the trial. He has so far been before Annas, Caiaphas, and Pilate. This video is an outreach of the Essex United Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri.